Welcome back to the continuing series, What is the Blood Covenant and Why is it so important? We left off discussing the covenant, the ancient East covenant of the threshold covenant, or the covenant that covered hospitality. Now, the host, by receiving the guest, was obligated with his life to defend, protect, and provide for his guest while he was in his home. This obligation was held the same as if it was his own family member. Now, heaven also has a blood covenant. Our Heavenly Father is also serious about the blood covenant that He makes with us. He keeps His children safe under the shadow of His roof. Let's turn, if you will, to Psalm 91, verse 1. And it states, "He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." David is stating here that to the same degree that Lot was willing to do anything, give up the life of his own daughters, to protect those who passed over the blood at the threshold of his home, our Heavenly Father, Yahweh, is willing to do the same for all who have accepted the blood covenant or crossed over the blood of Messiah poured out at His threshold. He gave up His only Son to die so that we can be saved. We'll talk more about this later. Now, let's continue, but let's go a step further to understand another phase of the blood covenant tradition of ancient times. As a common practice, a king would travel throughout the territory of his kingdom to assess who was loyal to him and who were his enemies. Usually, the king would travel with a large entourage of diplomatic emissaries and his army. In each village, either he personally or one of his diplomats would cross over the threshold of the homes of each loyal family, enter in that home in peace, and declare peace and protection for those loyal to his kingdom. However, wherever the king found a disloyal family who refused his sovereignty over them, he would not pass over the threshold of that house, but rather would send the army in and rid that home of his enemies. How would the king tell which families were loyal to him and which were not? You guessed it. The primary indicator was the blood poured out at the threshold of the house, inviting him in. Now, this brings us to the Feast of Passover. Understanding this custom of hospitality and how it applies to a king helps us understand the events surrounding Passover recorded in Exodus 12, verse 1 through 42. Now, the ancient kings and the blood covenant between them and those in their kingdom, and how it relates to Passover, is what we're going to focus on as we read the verses in Exodus 12. So let's turn to Exodus 12, and we're going to read verses 1 through 3, 5 through 7, and 11 through 13. And starting in verse 1, "And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak you unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house." And let's pick it up in verse 5 of Exodus 12. "Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. you shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood, and strike it on the 2 side posts, and on the upper door posts of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. And let's start again in verse 11 of Exodus 12. And thus shall you eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. As we can begin to see, after reading these verses, this takes on a different context when you understand the culture in the setting this is taking place. Remember, the king would cross over the threshold of those who accepted him in peace, guaranteeing and decreeing protection upon their home and all those who were under that family's roof. His enemies who did not accept him were destroyed and vanquished. Let's also read Exodus 12, verse 22 and 23. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood upon the lintel and on the 2 side posts, the Lord will pass over the door, and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your house and unto your houses to smite you. So let's look at what Yahweh is doing here. The common misconception has been, in many cases, that the blood was keeping Yahweh out of the house, when in actuality, the blood invited him in to protect them against any harm. He was and is the conquering king, passing over the threshold of those who accept him as their ruler and king, and stepping into their home to protect them from the destroyer, his army that has come to destroy his enemies. How did he know who was who? The blood at the threshold of the home was the sign of acceptance of the king's covenant and inviting him in. This is why it is called Passover.